At this time, let's begin today's event. Once again, how empathy is redefining leadership. It is my pleasure to introduce your moderator for today, and that is Christina Cleveland, Senior Director, Talent Development Solutions at Canadian Management Center. She has experience leading global project teams through complex leadership development implementations and partners with CMC clients to consult through the analysis and development of their leadership strategies. Christina, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Jess, and hello everyone, and welcome to today's session. We're very excited to welcome you here. We've got over 1,000 people that are registered for today's event. For those of you who are new to Canadian Management Center, and this is your first webinar with us, you may not be familiar with our organization, but we are a national provider of professional skills development training, and our focus is on preparing the next generation of leaders to thrive in tomorrow's marketplace. And we are the Canadian affiliate of the AMA Global Network, which is one of the largest knowledge networks in the world, which gives us the opportunity to bring you new research and information on best practices and emerging trends that are impacting individuals and organizations. So we're thrilled to be with you today to talk about this essential topic on how empathy is redefining leadership. If you do have access to social media and you are on Twitter, you're welcome to join the conversation with us and follow us with our handle @Canadian Management. And for those of you who are wondering whether or not you'll get access to the slides for today, we will be sending you an email with a follow-up that will have access to a link that will give you the ability to be able to not only hear the session, but also receive a copy of the visual of the slides with the webinar recording. I am joined today by our speaker, Sheila Jaggard, who is a CMC facilitator, longtime CMC facilitator. And I'm thrilled to welcome Sheila because she is a passionate advocate for the topics of emotional intelligence, of which empathy is a large component. Sheila has her PhD in Human and Organizational Systems, as well as her Master's of Arts in Organizational Development. But she also brings over 25 years of business experience herself as a leader, as an executive coach, and in a variety of different industries and sectors. We regard Sheila as an agent of change as well as personal transformation, and she has over many years continued to build her portfolio of certifications and research of her own to continue her own interest in this topic, and she's able to integrate that into the examples that she provides to our participants, gets rave reviews on our in-classroom sessions, and we're really excited to welcome her today. So since we have so much content to cover, Sheila, and such a big topic, I'll just pass things immediately over to you and welcome you for today's session.
Well, thank you, Christina. No pressure on that intro, so thank you very much. I would like to welcome everyone, and hello, everyone. We have a large crowd that's coming in today, and I am thrilled about that because that just tells me that people are really interested in this notion of empathy and how we can actually use it in leadership and actually connect with the people that we work with. So today we're going to talk about empathy and how it's redefining successful leadership and how that really kind of looks in the organization. And as experts in the area of management and leadership development, we're excited to be sharing this research because there's neuroscience behind the power of empathy, as well as some of the practical tools. We'll give you some of those today so you can take those away and become a more empathetic leader and ultimately gain some greater influence with those you need to collaborate with, but also those you need to connect with in the organization. So let's just take a minute and take a look at the definition of empathy. It's the ability to identify with the emotional state of others in a way that builds connection. It creates safety and it enables trust. You know, the interesting thing about this idea of being able to connect with the emotional state of others is that really and truly, we're human beings first. We're a lot of other things on top of that, but we're human beings first. And so as humans, we have this emotional side to ourselves. You know, the interesting thing about being a leader and being able to demonstrate empathy is the way that we can actually use this empathetic approach to understand the people that work with us, the people who work for us, and the people that we're trying to connect with within the organization. You know, recent studies that look at the effects of empathy in a business context are demonstrating that empathy has the power to drive measurable results. I invite you to take a moment to think about a leader you've really trusted and admired. someone who motivated you to work to your potential. And if you take a second to identify some of the things that they did to earn your trust and your respect, I think you'll find some of these things listed on this slide. So, great leaders are self-aware. Great leaders listen, and I don't mean just casually listen, I mean truly listen. Great leaders provide support, they provide focus for your strengths, and they appreciate your contributions. They're honest and transparent, and you know, the interesting thing about this is that they do all this with seemingly no real need to emphasize that they're doing this. It's because they understand it naturally. Now, that doesn't mean that empathy can't be taught and that empathy can't be learned, but there is this part of them that is actually empathetic. So while empathy has always been an important element in great leadership, you know, I can remember back when Daniel Goleman actually released Emotional Intelligence. Yes, I am of that era. And I remember when he brought it out, a lot of the senior executives poo-pooed it as being, you know, oh, it's that fluffy stuff, and what do we need to do that? We just need results. We just need people to be doing work. Well, fast forward 10 years, and all of a sudden people are jumping on the bandwagon with Daniel, and now, of course, Daniel has the empire of emotional intelligence. In fact, Christine and I were talking about the number of different books he has and the number of ways that he's using emotional intelligence. We are, after all, emotional beings first, and we need to pay attention to that. So the workplace, as we know it, has been rapidly changing. And, you know, there are no signs of it slowing down. In fact, sometimes I think it speeds up, and it's at breakneck speed. In fact, someone used to say to me at one of the organizations that they worked at that they started out on skateboards, and now they've gone way past skateboards, and they're into those floating boards that just take off on their own. That's how fast we're moving. So in the face of organizational demands and constant change, a global and increasingly remote workforce, in fact, some of these people you've never seen, and stressed out employees, we'll see that our success will be defined by our ability to influence people. And the way that we can influence people through all of this is the way in which we can depend on the natural relationship that we're going to have with them. You know, the natural relationship means there's a connection. They expect to have communication. You know, in fact, the new millennials are actually looking at ways that they can have honest and authentic conversations with the people that they report to. It matters most to them. And then the other generations are looking for meaningful work and ways that they can engage meaningfully in the workplace. Work that aligns with their strengths and the difference that they want to make, and the contribution not just in the workplace, but to the world. You know, when you think about the success that we want to have, empathetic leaders have the advantage. And you have the advantage because you're able to connect with people in a very different way. Now it's your turn to participate. We're going to do a poll, and what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take a moment, read the four different comments here, and select the one that's the greatest challenge for you.
So this will be interesting. The poll's opening on the right-hand side of your screen, so we'd ask you to just take a minute to participate so we have a chance to get some feedback from you. And I'm sure you're missing, you'd love to see option E, which said all of the above, because I'm sure at different points we're struggling with each of these elements. But we're really asking you to focus on identifying what's the greatest challenge for you currently, so that we can try to address the relation of what we're talking about today to that current challenge. So we'll just give it another second for that poll to be open, and while I have the opportunity, I do want to let you know that there is a Q&A panel where we'll invite you to submit any questions that you have for Sheila, and we'll try to integrate those into the session today. There is already a question connected to trying to identify for senior leaders that this stuff is important and not fluffy, so it's interesting that you use that word fluffy. Sheila, I'm sure that that's what triggered that question, so we will come back to that. So, Jess, we can go ahead and close out the poll to see what participants have indicated is the greatest challenge. So whether it's increasing organizational demands, constant change, team members who are global or remote, or team members who are highly stressed. So we're just in the process of wrapping that up to be able to get the results. We'll just give it another second. It looks like our leader is increasing organizational demand. So 41% of those participating on the line today, Sheila, are indicating that that is a challenge. Second to that, team members who are highly stressed at 27%, and then a close third, constant change at 23%.
Yeah, you know, those are interesting results. The organizational demands, you know, part of this is because of the restructuring of organizations, and organizations are actually looking at ways that they can reduce the number of people they actually have, and of course we know that when there's a reduction, it means some people will have to do more work. And the organizational demands are also about the short turnaround. You know, everything has to be done in a second. You know, that's not the way things get done at their best. And so that just adds to your stress. You know, just reading that, you know, makes your heart palpate because you're thinking, oh my goodness, I have to get this done by this hour, or I have to get this done yesterday. So this organizational demand is so widespread and so far-reaching. Where does empathy come in? Well, you know, it's about understanding that people have perhaps some time constraints. Perhaps they have some issues around some of the changes that are taking place in the organization. And sometimes the demand that they have, if they could just go and talk to a colleague, it would be so much better. But the other colleague also is just as stressed by that. So part of this is about being able to find an opportunity to have that conversation. And the conversation comes when you can actually say to somebody, you know what, I just need 3 minutes of your time. And we'll talk about some more tools as we go on. Thanks very much, everybody, for participating in that. And, of course, we saw that stress was right up there as well. Well, we know that, you know, stress it's perennial, but it's also at times more, it increases more, and at other times it's a little bit less. But, you know, in 2013, Stats Canada did a study, and they said that 62% of Canadians identify work as their #1 source of stress. Now, I'm guessing that that percentage is much higher now, just because of the nature of the workplace, and we saw the demand. So we're reasonably sure that's a higher number. So what does stressful environment lead to? Oh, my goodness. You know, decreased productivity, overwhelm, lack of focus, inability to prioritize, and that goes back to the organizational demands, increased illness, absenteeism, turnover. And by the way, those illnesses are not just a cold. Those illnesses are really quite significant. Missed deadlines, work delays, increased costs, low trust. The disengagement is a huge one for me, because when people actually disengage, it means that something has gotten so large that they can't possibly pay attention. And then there's a lack of creativity and innovation, and, you know, I think that that's one of the things we really need to pay attention to in this day and age. So how do we connect with people when they're facing these kinds of things? Well, empathetic leadership means that we know how to connect with people when they're in this state of resistance or fear or stress. And we need to know how, in fact, we can talk to these people, how we can build teamwork and collaborate. It comes back to listening. It comes back to using that empathetic part of yourself, and empathy is the gateway to results. Empathy has the power to cut through the stress. It connects people. It provides safety and trust. And, you know, if you've ever had a really, truly empathetic leader, you understand that you can actually go to them and you can have that conversation. But, you know, there's also a part of this that is foundational, and that's the brain science. That provides insight to how our brain responds in times of stress and how empathy can interrupt the stress cycle. Stress affects our thinking and behavior from the functioning of our brain. And, of course, I love doing work around the brain. Christina, as you know, I'm a brain junkie, so I love to talk about the brain. So let's talk about the brain and how, in fact, we can use these parts of our brain to recognize when we're in a hugely stressful situation and how we can get to our empathy. Well, the brain has 3 parts, as you probably all know. The reptilian brain is the instinctual brain. That's the brain that's the fight or flight part of our brain. And, you know, there's not a lot of higher order thinking then. When you think about instinctual, it's just an automatic response. The mammalian, or the limbic brain, is the emotional level of our brain, and it's the place that generates powerful feelings. So that's our emotional center. And then we have the primate brain, and that's the neocortex, and it's where the logical or rational level of the brain resides, and it operates consciously, taking in data from, of course, the reptilian and the mammalian. But the interesting thing is it analyzes the information, and it tries to make smart, well-informed decisions based on the information that it's fed. Now, normally, these three parts of the brain work together. However, there are times when higher-order thinking isn't accessed because the instinctual brain is in such a state of flurry and such a state of stress. And that stressed-out environment can create a constant change that's going on, and the reptilian brain jumps forward and says, essentially, I'll save you. I know how I can save you. I'll take care of you. So when you think about your reptilian brain taking over, it should actually kind of startle us to realize we have control over all these parts of our brain. We just need to be conscious of it. So when the primitive parts of the brain take over in times of stress, you may experience things that leave you wondering, what actually happened to my intelligence quota or my brain? I don't understand why this is happening. Well, you know, have you ever felt feelings of panic at work? Prime example is when your boss asks you to come and meet them in your office, meet you in their office, and all of a sudden you go into this panic mode. It could be that they're trying to congratulate you for something you've done, but no, our brain immediately goes to the reptilian brain. Have you ever had difficulty breathing normally or focusing on a major presentation, interview, or other high-stakes event? You know, it's really interesting how this happens, because the difficulty breathing is because once we tap into our primitive brain, what happens is all the blood gets sent to the area of our body that can actually service us, and that's the fight or flight. So I think I need to run from this. Well, the interesting thing is you stop breathing, and by the way, I do this a lot. I was saying to Christina, in every single course I do, I teach people how to breathe. That sounds so silly, doesn't it? But it's true. We stop breathing when we're stressed or challenged. Have you ever written an angry email response to someone? I'm sure none of you have, but I can tell you from having done this, after you send the email and you go back and you reread it, you realize you've missed the most important part of it. So what's happened is that's a big oops. So any of these can actually affect another part of your brain called the amygdala, and that's what we call an amygdala hijack. So where's the amygdala? Well, the amygdala is in really the center of your brain. It's a small region, and it's in the limbic area of your brain. It activates whenever there's a sense of a threat, or, you know, even when your logical brain can go on alert, the amygdala kicks in. And the amygdala, by the way, does not differentiate between a threat to our physical survival or a threat to social safety or the safety of our ego. It just knows fear and anxiety. Well, when you take a look at today's environment, you know, we have to think about what actually is going on. You know, back in the days of the cave people, you know, it was fight or flight. There was a saber-toothed tiger coming at them. Well, you know, we don't have saber-toothed tigers that are four-legged. I think we may have some saber-toothed tigers that are two-legged. But here's the interesting thing. When you think about your workplace right now, and I'm going to invite you to put some comments in the chat if you would, because I love to connect with you people. When you think about some of the saber-toothed tigers you have around you in the workplace, what kinds of examples can you give me? One of the ones that comes to mind immediately for me is the unreasonable client. I have no idea why I'm saying that. It just comes to mind right away. So what kinds of things have some of you run up against in terms of the saber-toothed tiger activity?
So we welcome you to participate in the chat panel and send us your thoughts. Just go into the chat panel, which is on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can send your comments directly to me, Christina Cleveland, so that we can share them back with Sheila. And again, we've got some great questions that are already coming in, but I think, and I love the analogy, Sheila, just that some of the saber-toothed tigers may be two-legged, and I think the example of when you get a call from your boss that asks you to come see them, immediately the response goes to it's negative, it's bad, you start sweating from different places, and you get concerned about what the conversation is actually going to look like. So I think that that's a great example of something that just starts to take over our brains and starts to turn off the rational thought and functional thinking and puts us into survival mode.
And the thing that's really interesting is that it happens without our knowledge a lot of the time. You know, we can actually have experiences that take place, and when we have these experiences, we don't recognize, you know, this is actually happening to me. I'm diuresing, I'm sweating like crazy, and so we need to pay attention to that.
Right. So just as a reminder, we had a question about what the question was. The question was asking you to identify for us what are the things in your work environment today that might trigger a threat response for you or might trigger an amygdala hijack. So some of the examples that are coming in right now, Sheila, are intolerant people.
Oh, yes.
Overly critical or gossipy people, a selfish manager, highly charged clients that might have visions and ideas that you may need to deny or re-explain in order to get a point across to them. So the unreasonable client, as you mentioned. So several examples, unrealistic deadlines coming in as an example of something that could trigger an amygdala hijack. Difficult conversations or performance reviews, judgmental colleagues.
Oh, no kidding. No kidding. Well, thank you. Oh, and they're still coming in. Liars. Woo. Wow. You know what? This says so much about where we are in organizations today. You know, we seem to have lost that social ability to be almost patient and kind with each other. And being able to be patient and kind is a way that we can look at this. And you know what? Here's the thing about, thank you all so much for all the things that are coming in, because I will say this to you, you know, our challenge is to get to our rational mind. So when you're dealing with some of these people who are, you know, difficult to work with, they're gossips, they're always negative, you know, even to the point of rudeness. And when you think about some of these people, it really is about you taking care of you. And the way you can take care of you is to be able to look at what's actually going on and say, you know what, I can take care of myself, and it is about paying attention consciously to what's actually happening around you. And just because these people are in your workplace doesn't mean that you have to respond to them. You know, thank you ever so much. You know, for me, it kind of begs the question, what can we do to help our primitive brain and re-engage rational thinking so that we are able to deal with these? So we have a second poll.
So we would love to get more feedback from you. So in thinking about some of the examples that you shared with us, our question is, which of the following is the most effective way to diffuse an amygdala hijack in yourself? So when you have those scenarios where you've got unrealistic timelines, or you're feeling overwhelmed, or you have a boss that's showing up at your door with a question, we had a few other contributions come in with somebody asking or indicating that you may have a senior leader who only wants to hear the answers that they want to hear. That could trigger an amygdala hijack. So what is the technique that you used? Are you trying to take some long, deep breaths? Are you telling yourself that everything's going to be okay, so you're giving yourself some reassurance so that you can try and re-engage that primate brain? Are you removing yourself from the environment or situation? Or are you talking to someone that you trust? Do you have someone that you can trust that you might be able to talk to? So we'll just ask you to, again, respond to the poll that's on the right-hand side of your screen. And then just let's go ahead and close out the poll as results are coming in here so that we can take a look at what our techniques are. And I would imagine, Sheila, in some cases, it might depend on the situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, I guess the thing that comes to mind first for me is in terms of taking some long, deep breaths, I think the first thing that we have to do is just stop. We just have to stop. And sometimes what we have to stop is being able to remove ourselves, and we have to stop the inputs that are coming towards us. And one of the easy ways, of course, is to take a deep breath. By the way, your mother was quite correct when she said take a deep breath and count to 10, because that is essentially a way to calm yourself down. Remember, you're trying to get yourself out of the hijack.
Right.
And so what you're really trying to do is get to your rational brain, and the way you get to your rational brain is by giving it some oxygen, number one, and number two, just being able to take hold of this whole situation. So what have we got here?
So our results are showing us that number one strategy, 43% of those participating today indicating taking a time out from the situation.
Love it.
And second to that is talking to someone you trust.
Perfect.
So I would agree, Sheila, that, removing yourself from the environment gives you a chance to not engage in a conversation or discussion when you may be experiencing an amygdala hijack, giving you a chance to, again, just calm down. But I will also say no one ever calmed down from being told to calm down.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think that that's a strategy, frankly. But, how many people tell you to calm down? I would say to you that this taking time out, here's my advice. Get outdoors. Deep breathe while you're outdoors, different energy, different environment. Walk. Get your energy moving within you, and when you take the time out, take a time out. Don't get right back on your device of whatever type, and don't get back on the computer right away, and certainly take it easy, take some time, and by the way, you'd be amazed at how quickly you can get back into shape. So I totally agree. Taking a time out works, and talking to someone you trust really is helpful. One thing that I just want to say about talking to someone you trust, when you think about the people you trust and the people that you can talk to that can actually talk you down, part of this is about being able to recognize that they're available to do that. Because sometimes you catch them at a time when they're not so available either. But what we need to be able to do is kind of step back and say, I really need you for just 2 or 3 minutes, because it doesn't take long to download that. The other thing is that, with this thought series that CMC has done around The Secret to Getting Through to Anyone by Dr. Mark Goldston, there's a lot of positive things in there about actually hearing yourself. What is it that's actually being said in your own head? Are you agreeing with what they said? And if that's the case, you're just hijacking yourself as well.
Well, and I wonder, just based on the definition that you shared earlier, Sheila, as it relates to empathy and whether or not the 24% of people who responded to talking to someone that you trust, whether or not empathy was also a characteristic that you see within those individuals. So they're relating to you.
Yes, and you know what? If you see the empathy in them, when you need to have that reassurance, you're going to go there. And wouldn't you like to be the person, that people see that in? And I will say that, this whole notion of being trustworthy, in a world where it seems that people aren't trusting, it would be just such a wonderful thing to have people trust you enough to come and say, I just need 2 minutes of your time. Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody, for responding to that. So, when we think about what empathy is, we certainly probably have a lot of examples about what empathetic leadership is not. And, from my experience, I have, in fact, seen a lot of the situations and been involved in a lot of situations where, empathy was not foremost. It was actually get the work done and make sure that you get it in on time and you get it done perfectly and all of those kinds of things. And I will say, in the earlier stages of my career, when I was just starting out, I didn't understand what empathy really was. But as I think I got older and understood a bit more about what people really need, I understood more about this, walking in someone else's shoes, not being in sympathy. And I need to make that very clear. Empathy is not sympathy. And I had an experience, recently where I had a client that we were going to do a project with them. They told me that the project was going on the shelf. I went to talk to my business partner, and I have to admit I was a little off the dial in terms of my disappointment. And I went to talk to my business partner, and what I didn't do was I didn't say to her, do you have a minute to talk? So she was in this place where she couldn't take her mind away from what she was doing, so she wasn't able to be helpful to me, and that just frustrated me more. So then I went out for a walk, and blessedly, the weather was great, and I was able to get out and actually work it through on my own. But when I went back, here's what happened. She came to me immediately and said, "I'm so sorry. I was just so wrapped up in this piece of work I had to do." And I said, here's the interesting thing. I should have asked. And I didn't ask. So I encourage you, when you are going to go and talk to someone, ask them first, do they have some time that they can actually work with you on this? And if not, go for the walk. Get out of the office. Get out in some fresh air and see if that helps you. I will tell you, though, retrospectively, I just wanted some help, and I wasn't able to see the other person. And sometimes I think we need to pay attention to what's going on with the other person. The other thing is, many times when you go to someone and you tell them, I just need a couple minutes, they try to solve it for you. And it's not about solving it. It's just about listening. So part of this is about being able to build those listening skills. And I can tell you that, the listening is not in judgment. The listening is simply listening. It's that notion of venting to somebody. Don't you think? Like sometimes I think we just need to download to somebody, and if we could just download, then we'd be fine. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't be a mess by the time we leave. But the truth of the matter is, there are a few behaviors that fall for me into the category of what empathy is not. The first one is pretending to listen. Those are the people that sit behind the desk and their eyes are always going to the computer while you're talking to them. Or the people that say, oh, just a minute, because they have to answer their device, not listening. Only occasionally showing interest. When it serves them, they'll show interest to you and what's going on in your life. Being empathetic to some employees and not to others. It's about fairness. And always being in a hurry. I love those people that charge around the office like the Mad Hatter. You know that they're never going to take the time. Keeping your own emotions and vulnerabilities a secret. When you have someone that you're trying to go to and you want to talk to them and hoping that they're going to be empathetic and you have no idea of anything about them and you're expecting them to be empathetic. And then delivering messages with sympathy, and then there's this underlying sarcasm. I'm sure, many of you have seen these, but I can tell you this. These do not promote a compromise of trust and safety. They have a negative influence on any kind of relationships and certainly on engagement, and negative impact on business results. And by the way, sooner or later, people just don't go to them. They find somebody else. So I think they may be listed in some of those saber two-leggeds that we saw earlier.
So, Sheila, can I just ask us to pause there for a minute? Point number 5, keeping your own emotions and vulnerabilities a secret. I think that this is an area that could be challenging for some leaders who may feel like they have to inspire hope in other individuals, or maybe not share that they see negative things happening within their environment, or they may feel that they're not comfortable or not able to express vulnerabilities because they're the leader. Mm-hmm. So could you say a little bit about that?
For years, we've talked about the mask of work and how people wear a mask when they're at work, and if their kids actually walked into their workplace, they wouldn't recognize them because they're so different than who they are at home. And many times that is because they don't feel safe in the organization. The idea of actually letting people know your emotion and your vulnerability isn't about giving a weakness. It's about helping people to understand who you are as a person. So it's not about revealing your deepest, darkest secrets. It is about being able to say, you know what, I truly care about what's going on. And I care about what's going on with you, and I care about this situation. Now, there are short-term situations you can deal with, but in the long term, it is about letting people know who you really are. I always kind of joke about it, saying that, up until my 49th year, I was very much wearing the mask, but when I turned 50, I said, what you see is what you get. And I wish I had done that earlier, because not being open to showing your emotions is not going to be helpful to those people that work with you. In fact, if people can see your emotion, it actually helps people to connect with you.
Okay, great, thank you. And I've got some comments from individuals who are looking for clarity on that point, Sheila, so thank you for spending a little bit of time there. And
Perfect, I hope that helped.
Well, and I think the showing some vulnerability allows people to mirror that back to you, so it creates some permission space really for them to understand that they can offload a little too. It doesn't mean you're going to the dark doldrums with them, but it does mean that you're meeting them where they are and giving them an opportunity to open up and share as well, which could take us into this next point.
That's right. The number one characteristic, according to Google, in high-performing teams is psychological safety. You know, team members feel safe and take risks, and they'll be vulnerable in front of each other when they feel safe. And this notion of feeling safe is this sense that I'm not going to see what I'm saying show up on the intranet at work, or I'm not going to have somebody make fun of me because I happen to be particularly emotional about something. You know, when you think about how we are reacting to things that are going on and what our emotion is, it really is important that we pay attention to the fact that we're in judgment easily 90% of the time. We judge everything. And if we can just step back and say, you know what, there's nothing to judge here. Someone is having a particularly difficult situation, and I'm here to help. And so what can I do to help them? And part of this is about realizing also that this person may want you to help them. They don't want you to solve the situation. So, you know, when you're asking if we should have solutions to everything, the solution around empathy is hearing what they have to say. Right. Because everybody has it within them to solve it. It's just we need to get them there.
And this connection to psychological safety, Sheila, I think the results that kind of connect in as a result of creating psychological safety is the opportunity where people feel there's more innovation that can be derived, there's better decisions that can be made.
Oh, sure.
We're not triggering those threat responses or creating those amygdala hijacks. So I would encourage you to take a look. Of course, you can Google the results of this study. It was a 2-year study that was conducted by Google, and the results were released last year. And there are top 5 characteristics, but psychological safety emerged as the number one. So I definitely encourage you as it relates to creating an environment that can be more empathetic. And the fact that many people on the line indicated that the amygdala hijacks could be initiated as a result of judgment. Right. So to your point, if in an environment where there's psychological safety, we know that we can take risks, make mistakes, ask questions without judgment.
Right, and you know, this notion of being able to be empathetic is about giving people the opportunity to take the risk. And if they make a mistake, that's okay. It's when they repeatedly make the mistake that we have the issue, and we can correct that by having some performance management discussion. So what are the top 3 do's in empathetic leadership? Well, keep an open mind. You know, this whole notion of keeping your mind open to anything that comes along and not jumping to conclusions is extremely important, and that goes back to the whole judgment piece. You know, become open to hearing what people have to say and knowing you don't have to solve it. That's the biggest piece about this. The second piece is acknowledge what the other person is experiencing. Again, I want to talk a little bit here about sympathy. Sympathy is feeling badly about something. Empathy is helping people to connect with each other. Acknowledging what the other person is feeling and experiencing doesn't mean you have to climb into the experience or the feeling with them. It simply means that you can acknowledge, and you acknowledge by saying, you appear to be, or you seem to be, or you are demonstrating. It is about them. It's not about, oh, I feel so badly. That's sympathy. Empathy is the you phrase. And then resist the urge to fix. You know, that's what managers love to do, isn't it? Don't we love to fix things? We love to get in there and fix it. And you know what? Many times we jump in to fix things and the person knows how to fix it. They just needed to talk to somebody. So we need to step back and think particularly about what is it we're trying to fix. Are we trying to fix them, or are we trying to fix something that we think we need to pay attention to? So acknowledging what might be going on in the other person's world is not the same as making excuses for them. This comes up because I know there's a lot of people that say, you know, well, that's just fine to be empathetic, but what happens when, you know, they're not performing? Or what happens when they're not doing their job? Or what happens when they're not able to get the deadline that they hit the deadline they're supposed to meet? Acknowledging what might be going on in the other person's world is giving them the opportunity to talk to you on that level, but it doesn't mean that they really move away from any responsibility whatsoever. That's not what this is about. Until the person feels heard, they're less likely to buy into any kind of solutions or recommendations or conversation. They need to be heard. We all like to be heard.
And with that, we're going to transition into our live Q&A segment. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. This is Christina Cleveland at Canadian Management Center, and I am here with Dr. Sheila Jaggers. So we are going to now move into the live Q&A portion of today's session. So we do welcome you to go ahead and submit any questions that you have in the Q&A panel, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. Just select to submit a question, or you can do so in the chat panel as well. Just be sure to send it to all panelists or to Christina Cleveland so that I'm able to see it and communicate it over to Sheila. So today I will forewarn you, Sheila has since lost her voice since we recorded this last session, but she is fighting to bring it back just in time because we have several questions that have already come in, Sheila, that I'd love to walk through with you today. So the first one that has come through from a few participants actually is asking the question about whether or not empathy can be learned. So the question is, can empathy really be learned?
You know, the truth of it is, empathy is a learned skill. There are some people that are born with it, there's no question. But the truth is, we learn empathy by being human. And we're all human. So we have that capability. I have a wonderful example. I have a client who was being anything but empathetic when he took over an organization. In fact, he was being a bully. So when I was called in to coach him, what I said to him was, there are two things that I'd like you to do. And he said, what are they? And I said, well, the first one is to listen, and the second is listen. And he said, I don't understand. And I said, I don't want you talking. I want you to keep it zipped and just listen to what people are saying. He said it was one of the toughest things he ever had to do. Because we all know that when we're talking to people in the organization, there's this sense that if we're in management or leadership that we have to give a response. And what he found over time was he actually started to learn about the people that worked with him. Now, I know some of you are sitting there going, well, he should have known that anyway. Well, not everybody's born with that gene. You have to develop it. So over time, he developed it out, and here's the interesting thing. What he's really learned about his people, he could never have learned if he just kept having the conversations he had before. Empathy for him was learning to listen. And his people are responding beautifully. Empathy in its fullness is about really giving people the opportunity to have voice. So, yes, it can be learned. How do you teach someone who doesn't have empathy? Ask them to listen to you. In fact, when I was speaking to one of his direct reports, she said to me, he never listens. And I said, then here's what I want you to do. The next time you talk to him, say, here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to listen to me. I don't want any commentary until I'm through. Would you please just listen to me in the fullness of what I have to say, and when we're finished, then by all means, please comment. And she said, oh, I don't know if I can do it. I said, well, it's a way for you to be heard. So she said, okay. So the next time she spoke to him, she said, I really need you to listen to me, and I need you to listen to me in a way that is all about you not responding to me, you just listening to what I have to say, and then when we're finished, I'd really like to hear your comments. That would be really terrific. She said she was astounded at how well it worked, and she said the best part was I actually felt listened to.
That's
so
great.
It can be learned. It takes longer for some people than others. I noticed there was a question about, you know, what happens when you're working for someone that doesn't seem to have an empathetic bone in their body. The truth of the matter is they probably had empathy somewhere along in their career, and they probably got it beaten out of them in some way, shape, or form. The unfortunate thing about organizations is that we tend to beat people up and spit them out. And what we really need is people to take hold of this whole notion of, you know, be kind to each other. You're with each other for 8 hours a day, for heaven's sakes, and in some cases longer. So let's start listening to each other and giving people voice and the opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Sheila. Well, one of the other questions that has come in is asking about how does a leader's lack of empathy affect decision-making, or I guess really can a leader's lack of empathy affect decision-making?
Well, of course, because if the leader doesn't have empathy, are people going to feel safe to make comment? Are people going to feel that they can trust that whatever they say is going to be used in the proper way? And that the most amazing thing to me about decision-making is leaders that don't have empathy and leaders that are kind of the bull in the china shop, they don't really want to hear your ideas for decision-making anyway. They want to make their own decisions. That's just the way they are. How does it affect decision-making? You only get the same decisions that they always make over and over and over again because they don't have an openness of thinking. They don't have an opportunity to look outside the box. And the worst part about this is people coming into the organizations, particularly millennials, coming into organizations have brand new ways of looking at things. And they're being ostracized and pushed to the corner because that's not the way we do things here. I have to tell you, I thought we got rid of that decades ago, but apparently it's live and well in organizations today, and I am sorry about that. All I can say is that there's no place for that now in organizations. The more, we're in the age of relationships, and if we could actually build relationships, we'd be in a lot better place. I noticed somebody sent in, you know, one of the things that bothers them the most is a boss that steals their ideas and makes them their own. I have a wonderful little quip for that person. Many, many, many years ago, I was a brand new head nurse, actually, and I was at my very first management meeting. There were probably 90 people in the audience, and they were going to go with a program that I had used in my previous hospital, so I stood up to say it's a really good program, and I think we could do this and this and this. And when I sat down, there was dead silence, and I turned to my colleague and said, why aren't they picking it up? And she said, just wait. And I said, okay. And she said, just wait. So I said, all right. So I'm waiting and waiting and waiting, and all of a sudden, this more senior person stood up and said, this is what I think we should do. It's exactly what I said. And everybody said, that's a great idea. And I turned to this person and I said, what was that about? And she said, I'll speak to you afterwards. At the end of the meeting, I said, what was that about? And she said, here's what you need to understand. They didn't want to hear from you. They wanted to hear from somebody that they knew and trusted. And so they were taking your ideas, they thought they were good ideas, and moving forward. I said, well, that was my idea. And she said to me, and here's the pearls of wisdom, if you think that's your last good idea, you fight for it. But if you think there's a possibility you're going to have a good idea sometime in the next 10 years, let it go. And that's exactly it. Let it go. Sooner or later, they'll get caught out. Sooner or later, someone will ask for detail, and they won't have it.
So another question coming in, Sheila, from Andrea is, how do we communicate to senior management that a lack of empathy results in employee turnover, which can carry real costs because they just don't seem to care or perhaps don't have the awareness of the impacts of behavior?
Unhappy people vote with their feet. That's simple. And in a time when organizations need their best people, they really need to be in a place of understanding this. Here's another little tidbit. There's a great book out by Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, and Simon's book is leaders eat last. And it's all about how the military actually grooms leaders and how when they line up for their meals, they let the most junior people eat first and the most senior people eat last. And it's this notion of paying homage to those who are coming into the organization with new ideas and being able to do things, and to let leadership know where leadership should be. And I think that one of the things that's really important is to put books that you're reading around this. Even if you have a book, I'm just trying to think what the title of that book is on absenteeism, but if you can put the book on the corner of your desk, people walk by your desk and they see what you're reading. It doesn't mean you have to launch into the reason you need to read this book is because you're the central feature. It just needs to be there so that they can see what's going on. When you're at meetings, bringing forward research that has actually been documented. When you're speaking to people in the organization, talking about the way in which some of the things that are happening are having adverse effects on people in the organization. So much so that the organization, if it's a profit-making organization, when they start to lose money, they'll pay attention. If it's a not-for-profit organization, there tends to be a bit more, I would say, compassion, but doesn't always translate the way you'd like it to.
And there's definitely some questions about kind of connecting into vulnerability. So to make a mention again of that author, Simon Sinek, who has a book, Leaders Eat Last. There's also a great TED Talk about showing vulnerability as a leader, and I think it's a great piece to be able to reference and share as well. So there is one last question here that there's several questions that we might not be able to get to, but we'll keep going. One coming in about, how do you manage in a situation where people may take advantage of your empathy, or they may mistake empathy for a weakness?
Yeah, generally speaking, empathy is about giving people an opportunity to speak, hearing them, listening to them, and then letting them go on their way. It's not about solving their issues or anything else. The problem becomes when it slips over into sympathy. And you have to be very, very clear about the line, because empathy is not sympathy. Empathy is listening to someone and saying, gee, I'm sorry that happened. That's too bad. Sympathy is when you say, well, have you thought of doing this? And every time you see them saying, are you okay? There's a very fine line between empathy and sympathy. And when you get into an empathetic place, people see you as genuinely caring and building relationships. When you're in a sympathetic place, they see you as the person they can go to and cry and whine and carry on. So if people are coming to you on a regular basis, whining about what's going on, talking about some of the horrible things that are happening in the organization, that's not empathy. That's about people looking for you, first of all, to sympathize, secondly, to get on their bandwagon. So be very cautious of what is empathy and what is sympathy. Empathy is about caring about individuals, but it's about relationships, not about solving, not about creating anything in a sympathetic way. Does that help?
Yeah, that does help. And one other question here, Sheila, which is coming in from Jen, and she's asking, how do you communicate that you might be close to a state of disengagement and elicit empathy and potential action required to help you re-engage before your feet do the voting? And what I like about this question is that, we're looking for empathy in others, and we tend to be able to open up space to get empathy from others when we start showing some vulnerability ourselves.
True enough.
So, please add to that, Sheila.
True enough. When you show empathy, people are empathetic back. Now, that doesn't mean that the hard nose in the corner office is going to be all of a sudden empathetic tomorrow, just because you happen to be empathetic to them. But here's what I will say about disengagement. Disengagement is not just about the organization. Disengagement is about you. And what is it that's got you disengaging from the organization? And if you feel that the organization is not meeting your needs, and if you feel that you want more from the organization in terms of engagement, what is it that you want, and ask for that. It's not about the empathetic side of it. It's about asking for what you really want. So if you're feeling disengaged because you're not getting projects that you want to get, ask for those projects. And if you're turned down for those projects, then it's a different conversation. But this notion of being disengaged isn't just about empathy. The disengagement is that you're not getting fulfilled at what you want to have, and that's what everyone wants in the workplace. So figure out what it is that is going to give you the fulfillment and the engagement and go after it. Because the empathy that you want to get from someone isn't, oh, well, that's too bad, you're not getting what you want. The empathy you want is, I didn't know you were interested. Let me give you a chance.
Yeah, I think that's a great distinction, Sheila, and we've gotten a response from the participant. Again, thank you for your contribution there. So another participant is asking about an individual who they work with who didn't seem aware that a lack of empathy might keep them away from their next career step.
Oh, yeah.
But now seems to understand that, and then the question is about how he can work towards developing that competency. And I think through the session today you've talked about what empathetic leaders do, so we've helped to map out some of those behaviors in terms of what the outcomes are for what they're capable of, and there are resources that are available to help continue to develop in this competency area. And one resource that we've referenced through today is based on a book by Dr. Mark Wolfson, which is called Just Listen, Discover the Secret to Getting Through to Absolutely Anyone. And this is a program that we have available, which is a 2-day course that reviews some of the foundations and fundamentals of empathy, introduces that concept of neuroscience that Sheila's been talking about during today's session, and also introduces 9 core rules to being able to get through to anyone. And in our attempts to get through to anyone, we're also able to get through to ourselves because it creates some safety and creates a really healthy exchange and dialogue between individuals. If you'd like to see a video on this particular resource or to get access to some free resources that are on the same topic, you can visit our website at cmcoutperform.com. In the free resources section, we do have a section on mindfulness in the workplace, which will give you access to some great resources. And we also have several courses connected to this topic that you might be interested in taking a look at, whether it's to refer some of the people that you've been asking questions about to, or to potentially engage in yourself. I think the very fact that you have chosen to participate in a webinar on this topic shows your commitment to being able to improve and develop yourself and to support those around you in their endeavor and their journeys to improve and develop themselves as well. So we commend you for taking the time out to be here today. For those of you who are participating, who are looking to report your PDUs for participating, Canadian Management Centre is a global registered education provider. So these are the details that you require in order to be able to report for your PDUs. And we're also very interested in hearing from you about other webinar topics that you might be interested in. We have several others that are posted up on our website that you can get access to. One that's coming up next month is focused on your high potential employees, so how to coach them so you can keep them. So check out our website for additional information, but please do tell us what other webinar topics you're interested in. You can certainly enter that into the chat panel, or at the end of the webinar you'll be given the option of completing a survey. So again, we do thank you for participating in today's session. Thank you for the healthy conversation and your questions that you've submitted to us. They're always great for Sheila and I to be able to get a current feel for what's happening in your world so that we can continue to focus on providing you with the resources that you need access to. Sheila, thank you for giving that last little bit of your voice to us.
You're very welcome.
And we wish you all a great rest of the day, and thank you again for participating in today's session.